Welcome back to this special edition of college football coverage with OT Sports this fall. I'm Trey Walker, and I'm here to do a little temp check with our local teams. Let's see how our guys have been doing recently. Well, let's go ahead and eat our veggies first so we don't have to deal with them later. The Duke Blue Devils have not been performing to their ceiling recently. Has David Cutcliffe's charm finally faded? We'll never know. Halfway through, Duke has played their way to a 3-4 overall record and winless in conference. Since their big-time win against Central in Week 1, they have earned victories against Notre Dame and Army, which happened to be in the middle of a hurricane, but stumbled at home against Virginia, Wake Forest, and on the road against Northwestern and Louisville. However, as much as this pains me to say, Blue Devils, you have reason to keep your head up. Last game against Louisville, your defensive line managed to contain one of the nation's most explosive offenses, and they held the Heisman candidate quarterback Lamar Jackson to a shy 181 yards and just 2 air touchdowns. They also had 5 tackles for a loss. It was a beautiful defensive performance. On the flip side, you couldn't have asked your offense to play any more consistently. Daniel Jones completed 67% of his passes and tossed 2 touchdowns. What's the bottom line? If the Devils' defense plays as well as they did against the Cardinals, they have nothing left to worry about. That's as bad as it gets. They shouldn't have any trouble with any of the offenses that remain on their schedule. Man, has it been a rough weekend for Wolfpack Nation out there. I mean, it's always rough, but this weekend was pretty rough in particular. Every year, the Pack find a way to agitate either Clemson or Florida State, and more often than not, they find a way to blow it up. But first, let's set the background a little bit. Let's see what the Pack have been up to. Currently, they stand in the 5th place of the ACC Atlantic Division with a 4-2 record and 1-1 in conference. NC State started their season with a whomping win over William & Mary. However, this beautifully crafted victory over the Tribe was followed by a tense, anxious game against the Pirates in Greenville, and they ended up losing. But they got back on track at home with gimme wins against Old Dominion and actually a huge big conference win against the ACC juggernaut Wake Forest. But most recently, they survived the storm and their special teams came up big to get them the dub against the Irish. Last week was no different than the rest of the games. State's offense has been clicking under the leadership of Ryan Finley, who by the way has been crazy accurate recently. The junior transfer is currently 2nd in the ACC in pass efficiency. However, he didn't play too well in Death Valley, completing on just 50% of his passes and got picked off twice. I guess people don't call it one of the hardest places to play in college football for no reason. Anyway, NC State had willed themselves into a winning position against the number 4 ranked Tigers. They had the ball with the game tied up at 17 with 7 minutes left to play. What could possibly go wrong? The Pack marched down the field to the Clemson red zone and put the fate of their soon-to-be upset in the hands of their sophomore kicker, Kyle Bambard, with a 33-yard attempt, essentially a glorified PAT. Keep in mind that Bambard had missed 2 other field goals earlier in the matchup. Let's take a look how Bambard booted this thing. Bottom line, Wolfpack fans, y'all better get some Jim Beam and some brown liquor because these next couple weeks are about to be rough. And now it comes to my personal favorite time in the show where I get to talk about my Tar Heels. It's been more of the same mistakes that have plagued the Heels in their losses this season. In the loss to Georgia, it was the inability to stop the run, specifically Nick Chubb. And against Virginia Tech, it was failure to hang on to the ball, which apparently isn't too easy in the middle of a hurricane. And third down defense, they sucked. For example, the Tar Heels converted 3 4th downs to score on a game-winning drive against Pittsburgh. But more importantly, most recently, when Nick Weiler saved the Tar Heels bacon against the Seminoles when the former walk-on hit a 54-yarder to seal the deal and snap Florida State's former 22 home winning streak. At the moment, the Heels are seated atop the Coastal Division in 1st place with an overall record of 5-2 and 3-1 in conference. What's the Heels' key to success? It's got to be Mitch Trubisky. The junior underperformed in his opener against Georgia, but gee, he's been on fire ever since. Trubisky has thrown for 3 400-plus yards games and has 15 touchdowns just in the air. However, teams have been adjusting their scheme defensively to his dual-threat personality recently, as he has proved that he's a threat in the air and on the ground. He's scored 4 touchdowns with his legs and 101 yards on the ground, 3rd amongst UNC rushers. Bottom line, UNC controls their own destiny. The remainder of their schedule is all pretty much downhill, but if the Heels were to win out, they still would not make the ACC title game because Virginia Tech did beat them in the regular season. So you better hope that the Hokies lose one more game this season. And of course, we can't forget Wake. Can't forget the Deacs, man. Y'all played FSU tough, but came up on the short end. Don't worry though, one more win and Dave Clawson is taking y'all bowling, 6-2. Thanks again for watching this second edition of the OT Sports Football Roundup presented by www.getbewell.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OHTEA Sports or on our website at www.ohteasports. From OT Sports, I'm Trey Walker.